Justin Trudeau is lying to Canadians. That's not the surprise. The surprise is his lies are turning into scams. These scams are going to affect us in the short term, medium, and possibly for generations to come. His policies that he's currently enacting are going to be so devastating to the country of Canada that we are potentially in for a lost decade. That's how bad these numbers are getting. In today's video, we have an economist on BNN Bloomberg talking about some of the things that Trudeau is doing and how bad it's going to destroy Canada. And then we have a video from Trudeau himself being smug as anything, so we'll put a smug warning on that. Be prepared, as he answers a question with almost exclusively lies and manipulated data. It's a very frustrating watch, but I love matching these two videos up together because we get to set the tone with one and then show that he's lying in the next in direct video. Let's get into it.
And regularly joins us to talk about some of these macro issues. Mark, it's nice to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you.
So obviously this is going to get a lot of conversation this week. Where have you landed on this conversation?
Well, look, in terms of the capital gains tax, I think the horse has kind of left the barn. But the one thing that I want to raise is how it is being implemented. So this is what really bothers me about the tax, and I don't think we've talked enough about it, which is how it is being implemented. And let me explain to you what I mean. One can believe, I happen not to agree with it, but one could believe that capital gains should be taxed the same as regular income. If you believe that, and if you were principled about it, the government, when they announced the budget, should have made the change to the capital gains inclusion rate immediately. Why have they delayed? Why have they delayed the implementation? Why have they waited until the end of June before the implementation? The reason is, and they actually say it if you read the fine print in the budget, is to encourage people to realize capital gains now, before the implementation on the 24th of June, at the lower rate. And by doing so, what they're doing is bringing government revenue forward from future years.
Okay, so that's big, and I wanted to let that run a little longer than usual because I wanted him to actually lay out his point. So what he said that they're doing and what they've basically stated, and I'm so annoyed that I missed this, is they're just tax harvesting from future years. And it's like, I just didn't, obviously I knew that they were just trying to steal more money from Canadians, but I didn't think of the impact of what that means by them shoving all of that tax harvesting happening into the first, few couple months since they made that announcement, because now they get to take credit for this increase tax collection that they're going to do. And remember, this is on the backs of Canadians who are selling stuff, whether it's their businesses and doctors. I just watched another video about how this exact tax could be impacting healthcare in Canada because doctors are going to be retiring earlier. So now we have this short-term tax harvest that they get to say, look, our deficit's not as big as we thought because we had all this tax come in. Oh, it's psychotic.
And this, to me, is the Ponzi scheme that is being put in place with this capital gains tax. In other words, what we are doing and what the government is doing is stealing revenue, tax revenue, from future governments in order to bring it into the fiscal 25 year. And they say that. They say it's $7.5 billion that they're bringing forward. If they were principled about it, if there was a principle behind this change, they would have implemented it immediately. Instead, it's simply a way to bring money forward for the government in this fiscal year to keep the deficit at only $40 billion.
And what do you think
Only $40 billion, which, remember that 40 billion number actually, because that's what they're trying to keep the deficit at, including the 7 billion in manipulated capital gains tax. This is important because it's only 40 billion, which is crazy number. And again, that's their planned budgeted deficit. We always overspend. We always overspend, which means their planned 40 billion, which includes that minus 7 billion. So let's just say 47 billion is what it should be, is going to be even more. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be like 50, 60 billion probably.
The long-term ramifications of something like that are, outside of just bringing forward tax revenue?
Well, you're going to make it more difficult. There's going to be less revenue for future governments, again, because people are going to sell and be encouraged to sell their capital anywhere where they have a capital gain prior to the new rate coming into effect. And then the other implication is the one that we've talked about, and it is about a tax on innovation, a tax on spending, a tax on productivity gain. I happen to believe that this will have an impact in terms of capital spending in the country.
Yeah,
why spend here? We're in a competitive environment for capital. Why, if I was a business, would I spend in Canada when I can spend in another country, whether it be in Europe with lower rates or in the United States with lower rates? But to me,
so again, very important point. We need to remember this when Trudeau talks, okay? Because everything, it just coincidentally lined up that everything this guy says goes with what Trudeau's saying, because he's talking about foreign investment. That's been one of Trudeau's big bragging points. And we are seeing a fleeing of capital out of Canada like we've never seen before. So
even leaving that aside, the implementation of this is disingenuous.
And you think if they had implemented it right away, I mean, wouldn't that have still forced some people to think about, making changes, or actually
no,
would they be able to put them
John,
off?
if you implement it right away, then there's no incentive to sell early and to bring that revenue forward.
Right.
So to me, and they say it in the budget. They say it in the budget. They claim that that's going to bring forward $7.5 billion in revenues. I suspect that number is even higher.
And does that, I mean, it almost sounds like you're saying this is a political choice as opposed to an economic choice.
No, it's a revenue choice for the government. It was a political choice in and of itself, and you were principled about it, you would have made the implementation effective as of the budget date.
You started the conversation by saying it is not your view that treating capital gains the way we treat, one's income on a taxation level, that they should be treated equally. What is your, as someone who's sort of watched this stuff unfold for years, what's your view?
Yeah, well, look, I two things. I think it's very simple. The first is, do we believe from a policy perspective that we should be incenting individuals and businesses to spend money on capital assets, on investments that will help produce greater economic growth in
So what he's saying, he kind of gets into one of the numbers later, but America, because of their more favorable capital gains taxes and things that they have with spending on investments in business and what you can write off and these other things, they have way more spending and investment per worker than Canada does. And now, for us, our productivity as a country is already plummeting. And, we're hardly manufacturing anything. We're basically just this scam country, which, again, we'll get into. We're debt-based. We're not producing. We're running almost exclusively off immigration. And now we're disincentivizing small businesses from starting, growing, and investing in themselves in Canada. It's crazy
in the long term. So that's the first, and I think that's an important argument for the economy overall. And then the second point is you're in a competitive world, right? People have choices in terms of where they invest, particularly businesses. Individuals have choices in terms of where they want to be resident, and I think Canada has to be competitive on the global stage. So those are the two reasons.
So when the finance minister talks about this impacting a small group of Canadians, you're saying the risk is that
the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, aka biggest liar, maybe second only to Trudeau in all of Canada.
That small group of Canadians who actually play a role in creating a lot of wealth for the country could look to put their capital elsewhere.
Correct. And it's not about the number of Canadians that are impacted. It's about the number of dollars at work in the economy that are impacted. And that turns out that that's a lot of dollars in this economy, an economy that is already suffering from sluggish productivity growth. We're at a 27% productivity deficit to the United States. And why would we put more sand in the gears of the Canadian economy, which is already suffering from a lot of effects of things like
That deficit is even larger when you think about it, because yes, that's a productivity of 27%, and that's just going by obviously percentages. But when you factor in what's that's actually worth, because their economy is so much bigger than ours, so for them to be that much more productive than us, like especially on a per capita level and these other things, it's like it's crazy how poor we're actually doing.
Provincial trade barriers and a lack of competition.
Speaking of being inside the country, we're having a robust conversation around this inside the country. You travel to a lot of places around the world when it comes to new capital coming to Canada, because there's this, you just said it, like there's the people can put their money anywhere. Has there been a reaction in private circles that maybe they would think twice about doing something because of a change like this? Or
look, John, I think people fundamentally want to invest in Canada. People like Canada, they like our rule of law, they like the fact that we're part of the North American environment, that we're part of the USMCA.
You can money launder here, get away with a ton of financial crimes. If you start a business here, you know that we have 10 of India's most wanted gang criminals in Canada right now. Did you know that? That's why people want to come here. But anyways, go on.
They like the fact that Canadians are generally hardworking and want to get ahead. This is a safe place in a very complicated and dangerous world today to invest. But when you peel back that onion, when you're talking to people internationally and they talk about the barriers of investing in Canada, how difficult it is regulatorily, how the tax system is making it harder, how the tax system is unpredictable and uncompetitive, all of those things make it much more difficult for people that otherwise want to invest capital in this country to actually invest capital.
Yes, they are not investing. They would love to. Canada is generally safe, even though it's corrupt, even though there's so much crime here happening now. It is generally considered safe and stable, so people want to bring their money here, but they're stopping, and it is falling off a cliff in 2024. So everything he said there relates to this smug little goober who we're going to get into. His face is already pissing me off. He hasn't even talked yet, but let's listen to his answer to this question. Some of you may have seen it, but I wanted to provide a little bit of background info to his answers.
The question is, over the last 10 years, you've added over $1 trillion in debt to our national economy. That comes along with a price tag of approximately
He nods like, yep, I did $1 trillion.
$32.3 billion in debt servicing costs per year, which if we divided that money between every municipality in Canada, every single municipality, small and large, would have an additional $9 million. And since we all know that the budget will not balance itself, when are you going to balance the budget?
Look at his face. The budget.
Well, listen, I really appreciate the question because it gives me an opportunity to sort of highlight some of the things about how the Canadian economy is doing.
Yeah, why don't we highlight those?
There are the three largest AAA-rated economies in the world are the United States, Germany, and Canada. We have a AAA rating because international bond rating agencies look at Canada's economy, look at our fiscal situations of both federal and subnational provincial governments, and say that is on a sustainable track. We have
no, they don't. They're corrupt agencies that control this. Anyways.
The lowest deficit of any economy in the G7.
Not true. So I actually looked into the deficit number. So that's one that I wanted to talk about specifically because I thought it was hilarious because he says we have the lowest. So I didn't even go through every company or every country in the G7, but I just went through specifically America and Germany because he used those as comparables for the other AAA rated economies. Oh, we're the only three. So I said, oh, I'll compare those. When I looked it up, yes, so technically speaking, on a per billion basis, then we have the least amount of deficit. Well, guess what? The US economy is 20 plus times Canada's, and Germany's is 3.2 times Canada's. And then so I was like, oh, well, what's Germany's deficit? Germany's deficit is 80 billion, and they're 3 times our economy. Our deficit is 40 billion. It's pretty simple math. they have double our deficit with 3 times the economy and GDP and all these other things. So they're still way more productive and they're way bigger. So yes, and population wise, they're also double us in Germany basically too. So it's like, okay, you know, maybe not double, but their population is much larger than ours, and their economy is much larger than ours. And when you look at all the spending, it's like, yeah, our deficit is smaller, but not by the ratio that it should be. So if you go by percentages, then Canada's still getting smoked.
The largest industrialized economies, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of any country in the G7. So
also found out that was a manipulated stat, that basically what they've done is they've gone, oh, well, if you take what our, you know, GDP and debt ratio is minus our pension plans and all these other things, so not the actual deficits, they basically went with like some of these other managed funds and included that. And they were, I don't know if every country does that, but I found out that Canada does it, and I was like, well, that's not government money, that's Canadians' money, that's the pension plans, and that's the, you know, the pension management funds. So I don't know if you can consider that as being part of the federal funds. I don't know, it just was a weird manipulated stat when I looked into it. I found that strange. If you're an economist and you're watching this, comment down below.
What that means is our economy macroeconomically is doing better than just about anyone else out there, and companies around the world are seeing that, because since 2015, we've seen a 60% increase in direct investment in Canada across the country, from Volkswagen to others. But we've also, just last year, we were the 3rd largest country in the world in absolute terms, after the US and Brazil, for foreign direct investment.
So that is technically true for 2023, but it's also down 24% now, and it is trending down even worse from what I saw for direct foreign investment into Canada. And again, he keeps using 2023, and he used Volkswagen, which he said German, which I thought was hilarious, and these other companies. We're paying those companies so much more. So yeah, they're coming to spend billions of dollars, but we are also subsidizing them with billions of dollars. But then factoring in the cuts that we're seeing, like we're into June now. We're in the 6th month of the year. We're soon going to be crossing into the 7th month of the year. There's been a lot of changes, bud, because guess what? In 2023, the new capital gains tax and all these other things, those weren't announced yet. We are seeing a capital flight like we've never seen before. So he's using manipulated stats. He's dunking with 2023 numbers. And then I love since 2015, and then it's only been trending down. So it was up substantially, but it's only trending down since stuff's been getting worse.
So companies from around the world are coming to invest in Canada because they see it as a good investment in the future. Now, I've said all that to say the Canadian economy is in stellar position from a macroeconomic
Not true. So he's operating from a false base idea. So when he gets into this
level, but the reality that all of you know is that Canadians are squeezed right now.
Yeah, what the hell?
We're faced with grocery prices that are too high, rents that are too high, mortgage payments that are too high. We're faced with challenges around fuel and heating costs.
Who's
really
causing those challenges?
Ordinary families. So
he says it. Fuel and heating costs, you're the problem.
What we did, I'll talk about the carbon tax a little later if I get a question on that, but right now I'm talking about how we're going to support with affordability. So we made the decision that if the federal government has a really strong fiscal position, which we do,
not
by all independent analysts and experts, what better to do with that strong fiscal position than to invest in the things that Canadians need? So we're delivering dental care to over 100,000 seniors over the past month who've gotten dental care for the first time, many of them in years. We're delivering pharmacare over the coming years to make insulin free in this country and provide prescription contraceptives for free to women across this country. We're stepping up with $10 a day childcare right across the country because that's an economic program and a social program. We're stepping up with student food programs, national food policies for school. Going to lift 400,000 kids into better nutritionist spaces. We made the conscious and deliberate decision to say, if the Canadian economy is as strong as it is right now, which it is, we need to put that in service of helping Canadians with the cost of living right now without increasing inflation, and that's why the Bank of Canada was able to just drop the rate on Wednesday, because inflation is coming down and now interest rates are going to come down as well.
Our economy is doing so well that the Bank of Canada is cutting rates. That's an oxymoron. That is silly, stupid, and dumb, because the Bank of Canada does not cut rates when the economy is doing well. The only thing that he said there that is something that I personally think is a good thing is I do think insulin should be free, because that's a life-impacting and life-saving drug. Everything else he listed there was nonsense. Why do we need a child food program? Because inflation is through the roof. It's so expensive. Why do we need childcare programs? Because everybody needs a dual household income just to get by right now, because Canada has gotten so expensive. You know, so everything, when you break down what he's saying, it's like, oh, so you've absolutely ruined Canada and now you have to promise unlimited free stuff? Come on.
So that was a choice we made. And in parenthesis, every single one of those programs, dental, pharma, childcare, are things that the Conservative Party chose to vote against because they're worried that inflation was too high. Well, we're dropping inflation and we're being there for Canadians, not with cuts and austerity, and we're going to keep doing that. And on the carbon price, it actually puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families. That's a parliamentary budget officer who says that. It's absolutely true.
He's getting booed. He's got the smug little thing. He knows it's absolutely true. I'm Justin Trudeau. It's not absolutely true. It's been proven wrong. And recently, he doubled down on it being wrong. So now you've taken his report and lied again. Like, these scams, everything that he's blatantly lying about is going to be so devastating to Canada as a country. Like, we are going to be picking up the pieces for so long from this smug guy, and the economics are just not there. It's crazy. So remember, we have to axe the tax, so buy your shirt in the link down below. We got to get the message out there. I am a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to work with me as a real estate agent, my link is down below. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.